Okay, lecture 32 through 34, part 5. Okay, we've got the application of a systems with three variables. So last one we went over our x, y's, and z's and how we were going to solve those. And today we're going to go over a particular question that you could see on your exam where they apply the principles of our systems with three equations. So let's go ahead and take a look at the question. And the question says, find the quadratic function a x squared plus bx plus c equals 0 whose graph passes through three xy points 0, -1, 2, 3, and 3, 2. Basically what they're saying is find a, b, and c that satisfy my given conditions. Okay, so we've got a quadratic function, which means I've got a parabola. This is our standard form of our parabola, right? And I know that parabola runs through the point 0, -1, 2, 3, and 3, 2. So I need to figure out how am I going to use these 3 points to figure out what my A is, what my B is, and what my C is in the standard form. Okay? Now, if I think about it, the standard form of quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, I can say that equals a couple different things. One, I could say it equals f of x, or I could say that it equals y. Okay? So what I've got up here that I'm trying to point out is, on your equation up here for our standard form, I've got two different values where I could plug in x's, and I've got a value where I could plug in a value for y. And each of these points here have an x, and they have a y value. So we're going to need to use the x and y values of these 3 points, and we're going to need to plug them in to our standard form that we have up here. So, for example, the point 0, -1. I'm going to plug in a 0 for my x's and a -1 for my y. So that's going to give me a times 0 squared plus b times 0 plus c equals -1. Then for the point 2, 3, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug in a 2 for my x's and a 3 for my y. So a times 2 squared plus b times 2, okay, plugging in 2's for my x's, plus c equals 3. Plugging in a 3 for my y. And then my last one, I've got 3 for my x's and 2's for my y's. So a times 3 squared plus b times 3 plus c equals my y value, which was 2. Okay? So instead of having a system of 3 equations with 3 variables where they're x, y, and z, my 3 variables are a, b, and c. So I've got my 3 equation, I've got my 3 variables, now I just need to solve. And if I look at this, there's some simplifying that's going to have to go on. Okay, first off, some of you guys may have noticed this first equation is going to be really helpful. Because if I have 0 squared, that's going to give me 0, and a times 0 gives me 0. So essentially, a's gone. Then I have b times 0, which that's just going to give me 0. So my b's gone. So my top equation that I found here is c equals -1. So I've solved for one of the variables that I needed already. Okay? Then if I start simplifying on my other equations, I've got a times 2 squared. Okay, well 2 squared is 4, so really that's a 4a, plus b times 2, so that's really just a 2b, plus c, which I just figured out that c is actually -1, and that equals 3. So I could simplify this one more time, and I could say that 4a plus 2b equals, I'd have to add 1 to the other side, which would make that a 4. Okay? Again, I've got a -1 here. I plugged that in because I found that my c equaled -1. So I plug in my -1. And I'm trying to just make this look like something I do substitution or elimination with. So I'm going to add 1 on both sides to cancel it on the left. And 3 plus 1 gives me 4. I'm going to do the same thing with my bottom equation there. I've got 3 squared, which would be 9. So that's 9a, plus b times 3. That's 3b, and then plus c. But I know that my c is actually -1, and that one equals 2. So if I simplify that again, I've got 9a plus 3b, and then again I'm going to have to add 1 to get rid of that there. Add 1 to my 2, and that gives me 3. Okay? So what started out as being something where I was going to have to do that solving for 3 equations, and I know you guys think that sucks, okay? But it turns out that I was able to find one of my variables right off the bat, so really all I need to do is do substitution or elimination with those 2 variables there. So it really ends up working out kind of nice, okay? So I'm going to start out. I need to do substitution or elimination. Could do substitution with our top one. Solve for b. They're all divisible by 2. Could do substitution with the bottom one and solve for b. They're all divisible by 3. I just naturally prefer elimination, so I'm going to do elimination on these. I'm going to take this one here times a -3, and I'm going to take my bottom one times a 2. Okay, so I'm trying to eliminate my b's here, and I just took them times each other, okay, and made one of them negative. So when I do that, I end up with -12a minus 6b equals -12, and 2 times 9 gives me 18a. 2 times 3 gives me plus 6b equals 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so now I've got, when I do my elimination, -12a and 18a gives me 6a. My b's cancel. -12 and 6 gives me -6. So I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides, and I find that a is -1. Okay, so I know a is -1. I'm going to plug it back into one of these 2 originals that I started with here to find my b. Doesn't matter which one. I can take 4 times -1 plus 2b equals 4. That gives me a -4 plus 2b equals 4. I need to add 4 to both sides. I get 2b equals 8. Divide both sides by 2. And I find that b equals 4. Okay? So I've got b equals 4. I've got a equals -1. And I've got c equals -1. And the way that they're going to ask for your answer on this one is they're going to want it in the standard form. So we've got our y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. But now I know what my a, b, and c are. So for a, I'm going to have a -1 x squared, which I can just write as a -x squared, plus bx. So my b value we found was 4, so I'm going to have plus 4x. And then I've got a plus c, which I just found that my c value at the beginning, I found that was -1. So your final answer is y equals -x squared plus 4x minus 1. So I had to start out with my original 3 equations, okay, and that was just plugging in the x's and y's from each of the points there. I ended up being able to solve for c, so I was able to plug that into the other 2 equations. And then I did my elimination to figure out what my last 2 variables were for a and b. And then I plugged them in to my standard form. Okay, I plugged in my a value, my b value, my c value. So that's a question that you guys may want to prepare for on your test.